Sean, as the guy from Philly who had to watch this whole thing kind of play out, man, what are your thoughts on how Daryl Morey handled the situation?
I think it was beautiful, honestly. I mean, obviously, it's easy to say that in retrospect now that we got a former MVP and a 10-time All Star. It didn't look good there for a little bit, um, but I mean, I think you're right on the side of like both sides had leverage. Like Ben was willing to light $19 million on fire, which gave him leverage. Like, listen, I'm gonna sit out. That's my leverage. Like, I won't come to work. And Daryl had leverage by like, okay, you're not going anywhere until I get the deal I want. So I think they both had leverage, and Daryl also shout out to him for not being bullied by Clutch or Twitter or I don't know anyone on ESPN or any of that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, it worked out for both of them. Surprisingly, one of the few NBA trades you can say like, oh wow, that made both teams better.
Hey, Josh, as a guy who was, just kind of an onlooker here, what were your thoughts on how Daryl Morey handled Ben Simmons?
I mean, I feel like overall for the situation, he couldn't have come out any better. To turn a guy that didn't want to play for you into a top 20 player who can put up 50 points or a triple double, if not both on any given night, is amazing. I mean, I think that like sure there's a mental health aspect to it that may or may not exist that people are more sensitive to. But I think ultimately he didn't force him to play. He, didn't really drag him out in the media. He said he was willing to let it go as far as he could, which I think. I mean, can you not expect that from a guy that's running a franchise? Like he was just being more transparent with the media than he probably had to be ultimately, I think, than most people are willing to be. I think there wasn't the PR spin that was there, but just really fun to see a guy turn a guy that can't shoot a ball into a guy that can shoot it from half court. And so, cheers to him. Like his weekend is going to be pretty great. I'm sure. I hope he celebrates. That's a coup at that point. That's a coup.
The thing is, what I like about how Daryl handled it is it shows you that owners should really buy into their GMs, their presidents of basketball operations, and let their basketball people be basketball people. Because there are other GMs who just couldn't do it because the ownership would not let them just stall him, just like stall him out, man. And I think the NFL should take a look at this and say, hey, owners, let the people who you hire to run your operation run your operation. Because if he had pressure, I mean, y'all could have had Harrison Barnes and De'Aaron Fox. Or you could have got CJ McCollum. And not that CJ McCollum is a bad player, but he's not James Harden. James Harden reuniting with Daryl, I think is also going to reinvigorate James Harden because people want to talk about, oh, well, he whined his way out of Houston. Well, new ownership, new GM, and the franchise wasn't going in the direction that lined up with where his career was going. He gets to Brooklyn and KD's hurt. Then, Kyrie decides not to get vaccinated. That's his personal decision. I don't care that you don't get vaccinated until it's time to affect work. Like, you got a job to do. And in a team sport, hey, demand a trade to a team that doesn't have a vaccine requirement or get fucking vaccinated. And because Kyrie didn't do that, you're sitting there like, James, you're like, dude, I'm trying to win a championship. You know what I'm saying? These New York strip clubs really ain't Houston. You know what I'm saying? Like, and now Kyrie's playing some games, but he's not playing other games. And to James's credit, he called Kyrie out in the media multiple times. It was subtle. There were subtle jabs, but at the same time, he let it be known. So I'm saying all that to say, good on Philly for allowing Daryl to do his job. But now, Sean, how do you think James Harden fits with Joel Embiid?
Well, just by simple math, just by the fact of that Ben Simmons wasn't playing, you basically upgraded Steph Curry into James Harden at shooting guard or point guard, wherever you want to put him. Like, yeah, Curry is an excellent role player, excellent 3-point shooter, but he's shorter. He's not very good on defense. He got cooked by Kevin Huerter in the playoffs last year, which basically lost Game 7 for us. He's an okay passer. Can't really get much separation with dribble moves. Not the greatest athlete. and he needs to set his feet to be able to shoot, which kind of eliminates shoot off the dribble for him. Harden isn't nearly the standstill shooter, but I mean, 36% from three career. He's an amazing scorer, amazing distributor. The one thing that I'm worried about a little bit is the Allen Iverson parallel here with his lifestyle. I mean, we've seen people before in Philly, favorite player ever, doesn't take care of himself, strip club all night. I will mention there were some funny tweets from strippers last night that said, "I just gave James Harden a lap dance. He said he's going to Philly." Greatest way to probably find that out ever. I don't know if anyone actually found out that way, but that's hilarious. But I mean, Iverson went from a 32-year-old all-star to out of the league by 34 just because he didn't take care of himself. And Harden's 32 at the moment. So you just hope that these hamstring injuries are more him just maybe giving up on Brooklyn. He's also, say what you will about the situations that he left, but he did quit on 2 teams in a row within a year and a half, maybe a year. You can say what you want about the circumstances, but it is what it is at that point. His track record in the playoffs isn't great, which Embiid's isn't either. So it's kind of redemption time for both of those guys. And we all know how he likes to dominate the ball, and so does Embiid. So it'll be interesting to see if this is a your turn, my turn offense, like the CP3 Harden offense was. It wasn't really they were working together. It was just, okay, you get a shot. All right, I'll get a shot. And it worked because they're both amazing. Embiid could win the MVP this year. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting what he does off the ball. It'll be interesting his motivation, because I fully expect him to come in and just look completely different. He kind of seems like the kind of player that can turn the switch off and turn the switch back on. We joke about the fat suit last year. He could come in and look skinny all of a sudden. You never know with Harden. And it's the best player Embiid's played with on offense since Jimmy Butler, maybe. Obviously he's definitely the best player he's played with, but it also fills Philly's biggest weakness, which was the backup point guard. Doc Rivers loves these all bench lineups, which have just tanked. Like, we'll be up by 13, he'll put the bench in, and then they'll just lose the entire lead immediately. So if you stagger the minutes, hopefully, you got to cross your fingers with Doc sometimes, but that means no more point Korkmaz, which is better for Philly fans everywhere. He can be a backup point guard, kind of run the second team, stagger the minutes. You always have an all-star MVP on the floor. And then we'll just see who does what end of games. But I think ultimately, as long as you pick up a backup big on the buyout market, because Drummond was okay. He was probably the best backup we've had for Embiid. But that's not the biggest worry at this point. I think they'll work out. It'll just be whether they work together, because Embiid isn't the greatest pick and roll big. He doesn't really work well in the pick and roll. He's not really a lob threat, which Harden likes. But I think it'll be more of a your turn, my turn deal. I'm excited, but cautiously optimistic, I'll say.
Okay, Josh, how do you see Embiid and Harden fitting together?
I feel like really the tough thing for me, if I'm James Harden, either way, you're going to be a 1-2 punch. I think I take my chances with arguably one of the best players in the game, if not the best player, and stick it out with KD in the playoffs, the guy that's like been proven and has done some things. No disrespect to Embiid, rather than like take my chances elsewhere, because you still have the possibility of adding Kyrie to your team if if the Nets decide that they're just going to pay the fine, or playoff time, Kyrie decides to get his life together and just do what he needs to do ultimately. But, I think that what you do have in Philly is a 1-2 punch that is pretty rare. I can't remember the last time that we've seen 2 players with this much talent offensively. Defensively is pretty one-sided towards Embiid. But I think that just the different abilities, either of them being able to put up 50 points on any night, they can play off of each other in a way that probably gives him more space than he had playing along Kyrie or KD, because of where he lines up and likes to post up and do some of those things. And so I'm excited to see what it's going to look like, but it still feels like it's set up for, the Sixers and the Nets to meet up in the playoffs, and for us to really see who wins. Like, it's going to be kind of like a referendum on who won, and we'll see come playoff time ultimately, I think.
Hey, and last thing, Sean, last year y'all could have made this trade and you would have lost Maxey and Tybal. How does it feel only losing Seth Curry? Like, I mean, you can say that you lost Andre Drummond, but sure.
I mean, it feels great. First off, because Curry's been hurt and not playing well. So obviously it makes it easier to swallow that pill when he hasn't looked great recently. Now I know that it's a game of runs, it's ebbs and flows, and he could heat up immediately like he did last year's playoffs. But Maxey has been amazing this year. I mean, the kid's 20 years old. He averages like 18 points. He's shooting 40% from three. Drives to the basket. Great. It's amazing. It kind of you keep your obviously you opened a 2-year window when Harden signed the one player option, so you have 2 years with Harden, and then you still have your long term future with Maxey. I loved it. I thought it was amazing, honestly.